that's where we'll be spending our time tonight. But as of them, but I want you to think about all of the sexual misconduct scandals of our day. Now, you go back and you think about it, in 2017, our governor here in the state of Alabama had to resign because of some sexual misconduct. But you know what? He's not the only one. If you go back to 2009, to June 24. Couldn't find him, didn't know where he was. They came to find out that he had been in Argentina with his mistress, and so he resigned as well. David Petraeus, you may remember his name, former director of the CIA. One of the things that he got in trouble for was supposedly sharing information, classified information with his mistress. And so you had that scandal in politics, and then there's the mayor of the city of Nashville up in Tennessee, Megan Barry, who just had to resign not too awfully long ago because she had an affair with one of her security guards, and so she had all of that scandal. You know, it's not just the affairs that we hear about. You hear the hashtag #MeToo and the Me Too movement, and you see that a lot of the abuses, perhaps, that are taking place are sexually related, and so you have the Me Too movement that has taken root and to some degree gone wild. I'll just say it that way. We don't want to cast any we don't want to dismiss sin. When sin is committed, it's sin, and so we don't want to miss anything. Sometimes it seems like that movement has gone wild, but all of that is centered around the idea of sexual misconduct. You know, as we think about it, it may seem that one of our standards is if you don't get caught, it's okay. And a lot of people think that what they do in their life, including their sexual life, is nobody's business at all, just as long as you don't get caught and I don't hurt anyone else. Do we really want to live our life by that standard? If we lived our life by that standard, that it really doesn't make any difference what we do so long as I don't get caught, what about rape and murder and stealing, all of those things, and just as long as you don't get caught? Would they be okay? Certainly that's not the case with those kinds of things, and adultery and fornication, they're not that way either. You know, if we go back to the 1 Corinthians and the Corinthian society, we probably would come to understand that in that particular part of the world that these kinds of things, this promiscuous sex, was not against the law. It was practiced, and as a matter of fact, when you start talking about prostitutes, the prostitution was so common in Corinth that the practice came to be known as Corinthicizing. So, as you look at it, it was all prevalent. These people who are Christians that Paul is writing to are living in that society. And Paul has to address matters that they are faced with on a daily basis, and so he addresses this one as well. We need to remember that the Bible teaches personal holiness. We shouldn't have to be, as Christians, reminded of that. We ought to know the passages, ought to know them by heart. Passages like Colossians chapter 3, at verse number 5. What did Paul say? What did he write there? Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you, and then he gives a list. And what does he start off with? If you're reading from the English Standard Version, sexual immorality. And then he says impurity and passion, evil desire and covetousness, which is idolatry. We're reminded of what Paul said in the book of Galatians chapter 5 at verse number 24. There, the apostle writes these words. He says, "And those who belong to Christ have crucified the flesh with its passions and desires." Well, Paul, what passions and desires, what what part of the flesh is it that you're talking about? Well, in chapter 5, verses 19 through 21, we know what he talks about. That passage is probably more familiar to us than verse 24. For the Apostle Paul writes there, now the works of the flesh are evident. And then again, how does he begin that list? Again, if you're reading from the English Standard Version, one of the works of the flesh is sexual immorality. And the list is much like the one that's found in Colossians chapter 3 verse 5, except for there are other things that are added to it. Paul instructs the Corinthians on the matter of fornication. And as he does that here in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, he gives us a unique insight into the seriousness of this particular sin. As we'll notice tonight, it's not like any other sin in the world. And so we'll talk about that as Paul teaches in regard to that. As we do that tonight, I want us to think about one of the main things that he begins this section with, and that's this. Everything has a proper use. Now keep that in your mind as we go through here in just a minute. Everything has a proper use. Now look, if you will, to 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 12 through 14. Let's read that together. Paul says, all things are lawful for me, but not all things are helpful. All things are lawful for me, but I will not be dominated by anything. Food is meant for the stomach, and the stomach for food. And God will destroy both one and the other. The body is not meant for sexual immorality, but for the Lord. And the Lord for the body. And God raised the Lord and will also raise us up by his power. Now let's think about what Paul said here. Brother Wayne Jackson writes, he says that this idea that's presented here in verse number 12, this particular phrase, all things are lawful for me, is grossly misunderstood in our world today. So many people misunderstand it. Paul surely didn't mean that just anything goes, did he? Did Paul mean when he says all things are lawful for me that he could do just anything that he pleased? Well, if that was the case, then Paul is a hypocrite because he had just in this very chapter, the chapter that we know as chapter 6, forbidden the Corinthians, the brothers and sisters in Christ, from doing something. What was it? Going to law, suing one another. And so if Paul says, well, it's lawful for me to do, then, and everything else is lawful, what he had written previously just simply does not make sense. Paul could not himself do what he, by inspiration, had forbidden. And so when he says all things are lawful for me, he does not mean anything goes. You know, it is true, though, that actions have a proper place and they are lawful in certain conditions. No action was unlawful, which is what Paul is saying, for if it abides by the three things that we're going to look at here in just a second. No actions were unlawful if, number one, they were in accordance with God's design and purpose. If they harmonized with God. In Genesis chapter 1, throughout the chapter, but God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. As God looked at his creation, all of the things, including man and woman, that he had made, and in chapter 2 we read about God creating the woman and presenting her to the man, and God telling them to become one flesh, to multiply and replenish the earth. One of the things that is comprehended in that idea that when God created things it was very good, You see, what God says basically is this: everything was very good. It's right. Everything is lawful for the purpose for which I, God, have made it. Everything is lawful when in the proper place and used for the thing for which it's been created. Even the sexual part of man and woman, that's a good thing as well. And by the way, Paul will continue on in chapter number 7, and he's going to discuss that topic even more. But when Paul says everything is lawful, all things are lawful for him, no actions are unlawful if they are in accordance with God's design in creation. Now, obviously, you know, a few years back we had the little class for the kids, and we often heard them say, you know, God's plan for marriage was one man for one woman for life. And that is the case, and God had some things in store for that one man and that one woman for life. And it's only for that one man and that one woman in marriage that they are to participate in those kinds of things. Number 2, no actions were unlawful if they were calculated to promote the general welfare of all. Do you remember what Paul said? He said, all things are lawful for me, but not everything is helpful. English Standard Translation. All things are lawful for me, but I won't be enslaved by anything. The King James Version, all things are lawful for purpose. Action. Does it or does it encourage the Paul in his passages as well. Paul says, one stumble, got to calculate that out. Not our actions. Saved by you know. He said that I in pornography. No longer functioned as a normal adult. To the point that it would cause him to act I can't let them control me. What we know is verse 13. Verse 13. And God will destroy both one and the an argument that was being made. And they sought to use that to justify Even those in the church were having some difficulties. Back in chapter. But makes the point that food both of those all the way back to the creation. What did the garden? And he says you can do what? They could do what? They could eat. Correct in that. And so, as Paul will destroy both one and the stomach is one. A good old tomato sandwich or something like that. Right, except that part is going to pass away. Both the stomach is not meant for sexual immorality. You can't use the argument you can't use that argument. It's not valid. Was from day one. Now notice he talks about 15, the resurrection chapter. The body. That's not the purpose. Is illustrated in the resurrection. It's not meant just to be here to commit fornication, to have sexual activity in his life. Specifically stated as we look at it and we think about it, Paul says the body is not meant for this purpose. Well, Paul, what do you mean? What else is there that we need to think about? Go to verse 15. Do you not know that your bodies are members of Christ? Shall I then take the members of Christ, make them members of a English Standard Version says prostitute, if you're reading from the King James? Do you prostitute? Sort of remind God forbid. Comes one. Flee from sin. Person. Understand that as Paul writes this, of Christ. creation. To get Christian how great among Christ. We're 1 Corinthians like to be using the body, the member of Christ, in a wrong way. You see, when Christ purchased us, He purchased us body, soul, and mind. He purchased all of us. And we are, according to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 23, Paul says, "Now may the God of peace Himself sanctify you completely. And may your whole spirit and soul and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ." Jesus owns every part of us. We're members of Christ. And so Paul raises that question there in 1 Corinthians chapter 6. He says, are we going to take the members of Christ? Are we going to take our body and misuse it? Am I going to join it to a prostitute? Are we allowed to take away parts of Christ's body, put them to immoral use? What answer does Paul expect? We all know. And it's the one that he gives. Absolutely not. Never. That should never be a part of our thought process. Paul says when we do that, we become one flesh with the prostitute. Isn't that what God said that man and his wife would become? The entirety of becoming one flesh is not understanding here, but it's that sexual union that takes place in marriage that Paul discusses here. You see, one who's joined with a prostitute in a carnal way, and as such, they have given so much of their body to that particular act, that particular person at that particular time, that he has separated himself from the one who owns him. Paul goes on and says something about this unique nature of the fornication, of the sexual immorality. Look down in verse number 18. Flee from sexual immorality. Every other sin a person commits is outside the body. But the sexually immoral person sins against his own body. You see, Paul, by inspiration, says this one stands out. This one is in a league all its own. Notice every other sin. You know, think about that for a minute. Other sins are committed by the body, but this one is committed against the body. The purpose, the design, the original reason that God created the body. It may, we sin with our hands, we sin with our eyes, but every other sin, except this one of sexual immorality, is outside the body. It doesn't necessarily degrade the body like sexual immorality would. Not only that, it involves the whole body, the total being. Notice that's comprehended and they become one flesh. When one becomes intimate with someone who is not his or her life. And then number three, other sins violate God's law, don't they? Where has God given us permission to commit any sin? Other sins violate God's law, but this one additionally violates the very essence and nature of one's own body. It's unique among sins. It stands out, if you will, among sins. You know, a lot of times when we think about sin, we try to categorize it, and we think about, well, you know, how bad murder is. And sometimes when someone sins, they'll say something like this, well, at least I didn't kill anybody. I didn't murder anybody. Ever heard anybody make a statement similar to that? Well, is murder a sin? Absolutely. But when we come to the reality of it, God says this particular action stands aside from murder. Because not only have you violated me, my law, you violated yourself. You sinned against yourself. And so Paul, he says you need to really think about that. You know what? I don't think a lot of folks in our world today have read 1 Corinthians chapter 6. This last part, 12 through 20. And if they have read it, perhaps they didn't understand it. And if they understood it, and they still live the way that we see so many in our world living, maybe they just totally snub God and themselves. If you continue reading verses 19 through 20, when we see that there is a proper use of the body, we'll see what it is. Do you not know that your body is a temple of the Holy Spirit within you, whom you have from God? Are you not your own? Or you are not your own, for you were bought with a price. So glorify God in your body. See, what we need to remember is our body is a sanctuary, a temple of the Holy Spirit. A place for the Holy Spirit to dwell. Now, Paul doesn't address here in this matter how the Spirit indwells. He merely states a fact. As you may know, some hold to a personal, non-miraculous indwelling of the Spirit. Others, that God, the Spirit, rather indwells one through the Word. It's not Paul's intention to discuss how he indwells. He just said, and we have to take it at its value, that our body is the dwelling place for the Spirit. Christ bought us with his blood, body, soul, and mind. And now he bought it for a place for himself to be with us while here. Not only that, don't you know that you're bought with a price? We don't belong to ourselves anymore. That's what Paul is trying to impress upon these people. And that's what we need to impress upon so many today. You know, when people make a statement like, well, I'm not hurting anybody but myself when I sin, whatever it is, you fill in the blank. What they have forgotten is they don't belong to themselves. They don't own themselves anymore, especially Christians. They don't own themselves. We belong to Christ. And therefore, Paul says that we must honor, glorify God in our bodies. Now, as we close our lesson tonight, we're looking here in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verses 12 through 20. We go back and we see that Paul says there are lawful things. All things are lawful for me. If we take the way and the reason and how God made them, if we use things in those ways, then they're lawful. But, Paul says, you know, we can't let things take control of us. If we use them for the good of God and for His church, for the world, then we're doing the right thing. But if we allow those things to control us, we've gotten out of control. We have a different king besides God. But then he distinguishes a problem that's going on here in the church at Corinth. This sexual immorality and the temptation to that because of the culture around them had to be addressed. And the same is true today. Because much like the culture of that day, all we have to do is turn on our TV for 30 seconds and we'll be inundated with a sex-saturated society around us. And Paul says, out of all sins, this one stands alone. When you commit that sin, young people, older people alike, when you commit that sin, yes, you sin against God, but you sin against yourself. Belong to Christ. One of the ways that we know of that is God has promised to one day resurrect that body. As we close our lesson tonight, I want you to think about that. Have you yourself been bought with a price? In other words, have you become a Christian? And living as a Christian, do you remember that every day? With view of the fact of the resurrection, which Paul mentions here in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, with view of the resurrection in mind, you know, Jesus addressed that resurrection, didn't he? In John chapter 5. There's coming an hour when all that are in the grave will come forth. Then he makes a distinction. He says that the righteous would come forth to the resurrection of life. But the sinful, the deniers, those who are practicing things like the Corinthians are being corrected for here, they'll spend their eternity lost. I don't want to be there. I know you don't want to be there. So if you're not bought with a price tonight, why not believe in Jesus Christ? Repent of your sins, make a great confession, be immersed, have your sins washed away. Giving yourself to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, allowing Him to control your life. And just about as we stated at the beginning of our lesson, anything goes if we don't get caught. We want to understand tonight, folks, that we are caught. Everything we do, in public and in private, we can't hide from God. So we have to be careful. We have to live our life with the resurrection in mind, because we don't have to stand in front of God at the judgment and give an account for all these sinful actions, including, perhaps, but not limited to, what Paul discusses right here. It may be tonight that you need to respond to the Lord's invitation. If that's the case, if we can assist you in any way, why don't you come right now as we have to stand as we stand.